So version 8 and version 9, Screen Designer and Doc Designer. I'm going to start with the Screen Designer first. Now, I am doing this webinar in version 8. I am having a problem with my version 9, but I will point out the slight differences that you'll see for those version 9 customers. They're very, very slight, and you probably won't notice any difference when you're opening up your Screen Designer in your version 9. So one of the first places that I always like to go is to the inventory. So because a lot of times you need to change up what your screens look like, what fields you have on there. Now, all of you are aware that you do have different tabs or pages down here along the bottom. These are editable, and you can add any field to as many different pages as you want. So you'll notice like description 1 is on every single page that I look at, no matter which one I'm looking at. The reason for that is just for consistency purposes. So as I'm looking at a season or I'm looking at a color, I can still know what style number I'm looking at. Now, if I wanted to add description 2 to my screen as well, if I'm adding it in a list view, I'm going to use Page Manager. If I'm adding it into the form view, which is already there, I would be using Page Designer. So I'm going to go back to the list. To get into Page Manager, you can right-click on any column header. It does not matter which one you right-click on, but it does need to be a column header. If you click on the field right underneath it, it won't work. It won't open. And you know you've got it right if you right-click and you get the option of interface. If I come down here to the field right underneath it and right-click, I don't get the option of interface. So right-click and come down to interface, and you'll get the option of Page Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Page Manager. Now you'll notice along the left-hand side, I have available pages, and they all match up to the titles that I have down here along the bottom. So maybe I want to add this to my miscellaneous fields page, or maybe I want to relabel the miscellaneous fields page. If all I want to do is relabel one, I can relabel it using this rename option. So if I want to create an entirely new one that is specifically designed for my needs versus everybody else's needs, I can click on this new icon, that's what I'm going to do. So you'll see I now have a new page 1 that I'm going to rename, and I'm going to call it Webinar. Okay? So now when you create a new page, every possible field gets put on that page. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to find that thick black line on the right-hand side. Everything above the line is going to show up on my screen. Everything below the line is not. And right now, everything is above the line. So I'm going to take that line and left-click on it and drag it up. I don't need to see all of these fields on my new screen. Okay? Now, item number usually is the first field that you have up there. Okay? I want to see DCS, vendor code, description 1 and 2. Maybe I want to see my UPC and my ALU. So I just kind of go through this list and I find the fields that I want. Now, fortunately for the version 9 customers, this list that you see is in alphabetical order. Unfortunately, version 8 customers, this list that you see is not in alphabetical order, so don't drag your cursor down. You will miss a lot of fields. You will need to go through this list little by little to find what you're looking for. So maybe I put cost and price on there. Okay, and basically I just double click on anything that I want. If I want quantity on that screen, I double click it. And if it disappears, you know that it has gone above the line. So you'll see, here is my line, and here are all of the fields that I double clicked on. I'm going to kind of rearrange it a little bit. Let's go ahead and get season. My data is not the best data, but it'll work. Okay? So I find all of the fields that I want to add to my screen, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply it. Once I click on apply, I see my new tab down here, and when I click on it, I see all of the fields that I actually put on this tab. Now I can widen or narrow the columns as I see fit. Okay. If I had UPC codes in here, I'd probably want that a little wider. Do I need the DCS quite as wide? Probably not. Now in version 9, you cannot shrink down your columns any more than the title will allow. So you'll notice here in the version 8, I'm seeing only part of the phrase vendor code. It's only giving me what it can show me. In 8, I can shrink it down to where I see very, very little of it. In 9, it would force me to keep this field at least that wide. Okay, so even though your vendor code may not be wide enough to warrant having that column that wide, in version 9, you are required, you're not allowed to shrink it down any smaller than the title will allow. Okay, so that's Page Manager. Again, you right-click on any column header, go to Interface and Page Manager. Now, maybe I decide, you know what, season's really not going to help me that much. I can take season off by double-clicking it, and you'll see it goes right below the line. Okay? If there is a page or a tab that you no longer want to keep, there is a delete button up here at the top. I simply would delete that, and that particular page, once I apply, that page would disappear, as you just saw it did. Okay? Now, up here along the top, you also have some font settings. This first font is going to affect the font that I see down on my pages. Okay? Right now, that font is in blue, and it's a fairly large font. So if I click on the little ABC there, and it catches up with me, I can see that I'm printing a font of Arial. It's bold, and it's 14. And it's also in blue writing. Well, maybe I decide I want to see it in red. So I change it to red writing, click OK, and then I would apply. My font has now changed from blue to red. Okay. Now, the other font icon that you have is going to affect the grid, your title headers, and all the data that's in there. So my font is actually set for bold 10. If I wanted to make it regular, I could. And by default, most of your screens are Arial regular 8. But you'll notice as soon as I apply this, it does make it a little more difficult to see. And that's why I make mine a little bigger. I don't want to have to squint to see what I need to see. So I prefer to make mine a little bit more noticeable. I have the availability to. Okay? Any questions about Page Manager? Again, Page Manager is what you're going to use when you're changing any list, whether it's a list of customers, list of inventory, list of receipts, list of POs. If it's a list, Page Manager is how you're going to alter that list. Okay? So now there's also something called Layout Manager. Okay? If I right-click over on the side menu, you'll see I have Menu Layout Manager and I have Menu Designer. Menu Designer is going to determine what buttons I have on the side of my screen. Now, in version 8, all it takes is a little check mark next to it. So you'll notice currently I don't have a button that says Inventory Quantities. I want to add that, so I'm going to put a little check mark here. For the version 9 customers, you're going to double click on the field on the left that you want to see, and it will jump to the right-hand side. So the left-hand side in version 9 is all the potential fields that are not currently on your screen. The right-hand side is all the fields that are currently on your screen or that you want to show on your screen. So in 8, it takes a check mark to make it show up on your screen. In 9, it takes a double click. So once I click OK here, inventory quantities is now an available field. Now, the reason that was grayed out at first like that is because I wasn't highlighted on an actual item. There's nothing on item 34. So I have to actually be on an inventory item for that button to actually come up. Okay. The other thing that you can do in Menu Designer is choose your button height. So right now my button height is set at 40, which is the default. Maybe I want to make my buttons a little easier to use because I have touch screens. So I want to make them a little bit bigger and easier to touch. I would change my button height. Now you'll notice that every button got just a little bit bigger. You may also notice that some of these buttons look like they have a line in between here. That is an actual, you'll see right here, there is a check mark next to the line. That's going to put a separator line. In version 9, you'll have an option of separator, and you'll want to double click on that and then position it wherever you want it. So it's not actually a line in version 9, it actually has the word separator. Okay. Now I can also leave my shortcuts on, so you'll notice all of these buttons, or most of them, have a keyboard shortcut. Okay. Now that was primarily done for our version 7 customers that moved up to version 8, because version 7 was a DOS program in a Windows shell. So it looked, when you first opened it up, it looked like Windows, but once you actually dug in, everything was controlled by the keyboard because it was DOS. Well, for the customers that were upgrading at that time, it was important for the developing company that makes Retail Pro to make it easy for those keyboard users to still be able to use their keyboard. In reality, I find that most people don't use the keyboard shortcuts anymore unless they're working on a laptop and they just don't want to deal with a mouse. They'll use the keyboard shortcuts. Now, if I don't want to show those shortcuts, I simply uncheck the box and click OK, and they all disappear. Well, then I find out that a couple of my people are missing them. They use them all the time, so I'm going to put those back on. Okay. Now, you also can align this side menu to the left or to the right. Now, in 9, you can also align it to the top or to the bottom. But in 8, we just have the choice of left or right. Now, you'll notice that mine is on the left now, and when I first changed it over, it was first suggested to me, I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm a right-handed person. It makes sense to keep it on the right. But once I changed it, I realized it is a beautiful thing to have it on the left because all of my keystrokes are so short. I'm not coming from this corner all the way over to the right because monitors are so much bigger now. Having it on the left does make for a shorter keystroke. So if I needed to go to filtered view, I'd have to come all the way over to filtered view, find what I'm looking for, then maybe click new. And so it's a longer keystroke to go from here to here. Okay, I'm going to put it back on the left. Okay, so that's Menu Designer. Now, Layout Manager, this is probably not the best place to show you. I'm going to go into a point of sale screen. See, even my system takes a minute. Any questions so far while we're waiting for this? Okay. Now, in version 8, you do have the ability to make screen design changes in a new active document. One of the biggest differences between version 8 and version 9 is version 9, I can't make screen changes if I'm in a new active document. I have to be in a former receipt, a former voucher, in the form view of some document. Okay. Now the reason that I came in here is to show you, let's see here, maybe I need to click on new. No, it's not going to let me change it. Let me find a place where I can change it. Basically, and of course, my Retail Pro decides it's going to slow down to a halt. Okay. Okay. So in the active receipt, I'm going to go in here into Layout Manager. And the reason I chose the receipt is because there's so many different options available. Now, this screen that I'm looking at here is the standard 1024 by 768. I can change it and start off with a basic 1024 by 768. And you'll see my screen changes very radically. I can also come in here and change it to a large 800 by 600. Okay, that changes it as well. Now, once you find a layout that is close to what you like, then from there, you can make screen changes. So that's when we get into Page Designer. And Page Designer is probably the most flexible of all of the different screen design options. So Page Manager to change list, Page Designer to change forms. And that's what I'm looking at here is a form. So once you find the screen that you want, right-click and go into Interface, and then Page Designer. Now, Page Designer needs this window needs to stay open while you're working in here and making changes. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your way, though. So I tend to move it off to a corner where it's not going to be in my way. But I have this nice large receipt font up here, but I'm using a little tiny portion of my screen. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this receipt field with its title. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and grab this field and its title, and then lastly this field. And I do that holding down the Shift key. Okay, this first field that I clicked on, if I was aligning things, and you'll notice right here there's alignment keys. If I was aligning things, it would be based on the first field that you click on. So, if I want to align everything to this total field, I couldn't do it without unhighlighting and starting over. I actually want to keep it the way that it is, though. Okay, now I want to move these fields over to the right a little bit. I want to spread things out a bit. Now, in 8, you can just use your arrow keys or drag it where you want it. In 9, you can drag it where you want it, but if you're going to use your arrow keys, you have to use the Control key. So you hold down the Control and you hold down the arrows, and it will move it over slightly for you. Okay? Now, the reason I use the arrow keys is you may notice that the right-hand edge of those fields are all nice and lined up. And yes, I could drag them, or I can move them manually where I wanted them, but then they're going to misalign themselves and I'm going to have to reset them up. Okay? So that's probably good. Okay? That moved it over to where I want it. Now, I'm going to move this out of the way. I want to take all of these fields down here, and I want to stack them similar to how I have these stacked. First thing I'm going to do, though, is click anywhere outside of those 3 fields. That unhighlights them so the computer knows that you're done with those fields. Okay. First, I'm going to take the subtotal field, and I'm going to bring it down about here. Then I'm going to bring my tax fields. Okay, and bring those down here. Okay, Okay, then I would probably bring in my discounts. And you could put these in any order. And you see I am manually dragging them. I will line them up in just a moment. I'm going to do shipping. And we'll do fees. And then finally, we'll do the total. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I want to make all of these fields a little bit wider. I mean, I have big fonts, so it makes sense to make these a little wider. I'm going to move these fields over because these are additional fields that I don't want to include in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of these remaining fields and I'm going to come down to my Page Designer window and I'm going to adjust the width. Okay, only it went the opposite direction. Okay, so I forget in version 8 we have a problem with that. So there we go. Okay, now. Okay, in 9 that's not a problem. You could highlight all of those and go to the adjust width and they would all widen up the way that you want. Okay. Now I will warn you, if you tend to be just a little anal retentive, which I do, even this slight difference in the width of the boxes is going to drive me crazy. Okay. Now, once I have those boxes in there, I want to grab each one of these and I want to make sure that they're all aligned to the right of that subtotal box. So you'll notice they all shifted slightly. I also want to make sure that there's equal vertical spacing in between them. Okay, so you will see that now the space in between them is all the same. Now I'm going to take the fields that I moved out of the way and kind of bring them back over. I'm going to line them up. Well, and I shouldn't have done the tax area. Okay. Well, there we go. Now, fortunately, in version 9, you do have an undo button. Now, I'm in version 8 now, and you'll see that the button is there, but that button is an undo button, but it undoes everything since your last save. So, especially when you're first working in this, it's not a bad idea to save periodically. Okay, I'm just lining everything up because, like I said, it's going to bug me otherwise. Okay, so get these lined up. Those are good. Okay, now I have all this empty space. I'm going to take my item box and I'm going to make it nice and big. Okay, that way if I scan 15 or 20 items, I see all 15 or 20 items. That's the main reason that I like to make it nice and big, because it does make it easier to see. Now, right next to the undo button or the exit without saving button is the save and exit button. And then right next to that is the delete button. So be very, very careful when you're in here that you click on the button that you actually intended to click on. Okay, so now all of my changes are in there. So if I make a mistake now, worst case scenario is I'll lose anything new that I do. Now, let's say that I want to add some more fields here. I want to add in a place for a shipping address. Okay, the very first icon that you have here on the Page Designer window is going to show you all of the fields that are available to put on the screen. The first column shows you the things that have already been grouped together. So the comment field, it's not on the screen, but I want the comment field on the screen. So I drag it out to the screen to add it to my screen. The customer info box is this one up here. Okay, I'm going to make a new group for my shipping information. So I'm going to click right up here on the add group. I'm going to relabel it shipping info. Okay, now that it's in there, now I need to put the fields I want in that group. So I'm going to scroll down, and these fortunately are in alphabetical order. I want to see the ship to, I need the ship to lookup. So where is my, I know I want that one. Get rid of that. Okay, I want address 1, address 2, address 3. Would be helpful to have the zip code. And the ship to customer number. That's what I wanted. Okay, so I put them in the order that I want to see them. Now I'm going to drag this new group out onto the screen. Now be aware, if you have a ship to, if you have a field that's in any group or it's already on the screen, let's say I wanted to add tax area for whatever reason, I wanted to add that in here. You'll notice tax area is not an available field to put in that group. That's because it's already on the screen. It can only be on the screen once. Okay? So that's how you can add new fields. You can also drag fields out if you want, you know. So you find the field that you want, you drag it out onto the screen, and there's the store credit for the bill to customer. Okay? Once you've done that, now I need to clean it up a little bit because these fields I just added obviously don't quite fit in with everything else. So using this field as a guideline, because I want to make the font, I want to make this field look like the other fields. I'm going to highlight the receipt number first, and then I'm going to click on the one I want to copy it to look like, or the one I want to make it similar. Then I'm going to come over here to font. And I'm going to click OK. You'll notice my font immediately gets bigger. Now, though, my title is running over into my field. So I'm going to just click on the title and move the title a little further over. Okay. Now, I'm also going to take this, and I want to align it to the top. And then I'm going to move this a little more centered. Okay. Now, as far as these boxes down here, the easiest way to do this is the only group I have on the screen that looks the way that I want it to look. So I'm going to use that as my guideline, hold down my Shift key, click on the comments box and on the Ship To box, and there's a few fields that I'm going to mimic in here. The first one is the color, or this header up here, the background color. All I'm going to do is choose the one that's already chosen. You'll notice now I get a white background. I want to include this line that's right here as a separator. You'll notice there's not one down here. That's the bevel. Okay, I'm going to just choose the one that's already chosen. Now the control font is the font along the top. Okay. Yeah, is the font along the top. Okay. Well, I take that back. No, the control font. Here we go. The font here is the title along the top. The control font is the data that would be in there. So if you had a customer name in there, this is the font that the customer's name is going to show up in. Okay, and then last is this label font. This label font is going to make the titles match up as well. Okay, so now you can see that I've got the font and the coloring right, but this is completely unusable the way it is currently. So I'm going to click on this box, and I'm going to widen it up. Just find an outside right edge, and when you get that arrow going both to the left and the right, you can widen it or narrow it. I can also move it up a little bit. I'm going to move this over a little bit so I can actually see what that title is. And I think I want to widen this a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to move this down. So I want to put that right there. And then I'm going to move my comment box right down there. So now I take this field, hold down my Shift key, and this field, and I tell it to align to the bottom. And so it moves the comments down to where it's evenly lined up there. Okay, now again, I save my changes, and that way I don't lose anything that I just did. Again, right-click, and go to Page Designer. Now, I actually want to come in here, and I want to add some fields to this item information. So even though we're on a form, we're going to use Page Manager because this is a list of items. If I look at this field in Page Designer, this field is called the Items field. It's the whole box, not individual fields within that box. So to change the individual fields in that box, I need to right-click in here and go to Interface and Page Manager, again on a column header. And I want to add description 2 and move it up. I want to add in the receipt price. I want to add in the discount percent. I'm also going to add in the original price. Now I'm going to rearrange these the way that I want them to lay out. So first I'm going to put the original price after the quantity. Then I'm going to move the discount up. Then I'm going to show the receipt price after the discount, and then the extended price. Quantity times the receipt price gives you the extended price. So I click Apply, and then I resize my fields the way that I deem necessary. Okay. Now most of these you can tell what they are if you get enough letters in there, but if you have room to show the whole title, you might as well. Okay. Now, if I make this much wider, it will shoot it off the page, but you'll notice you have a scroll bar here that will scroll you over. Okay. I try to keep it all within the outside edge so I don't have to worry about scrolling back and forth. Okay. Any questions so far? I've got a little bit more in Page Manager or Page Designer to go over with you, but any questions so far? Because I know I've given you a lot of information. Okay. So back again to Interface and Page Designer. We've looked at the Setup Fields icon. That's how we grab fields that aren't currently on the screen. Right next to it is a Set Tab Order. And what that basically means is when I go into a new receipt, I may want it to start in the Bill to Customer Number field so I can enter the customer information. Then from there, I may want it to go down to item number. For those of you that aren't using high security, you may want it to go customer cashier item number. Okay, this tab order is how you're going to set that. So if I click on that icon right there and I scroll up, you'll see that right now the tab order goes to the first field in the customer info, then it goes to cashier, then it goes to items, then it goes down to all these fields down here. Okay, now I don't need store credit to be in here because that's not an editable field, but maybe I want to move comments up and shipping info up. So I go ahead and I click OK, and I'm going to save my changes. And now when we go into a new receipt, which hopefully will happen quickly, Okay. No, let me change my layout manager to large 800. Okay, there we go. So my tab order, you'll notice it's starting me in the customer field. When I tab, it should take me to the cashier next, then to the items, then to the comments, then to the ship to customer, then it would take me over to all of these different fields down here, and then back around again. So that is setting your tab order. Now in version 9, you do have the same capability, but you also have the capability of setting the tab order within a certain group. Whereas in 8, it automatically goes to the first editable field, then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. You don't have any control over that other than the order that you put these fields in here. In 9, if I don't highlight any group at all, and I click on the tab order, I'm setting the tab order for the whole screen. If I click on this grouping and I click on the tab order, then it's going to show me just the fields in this group and allow me to set the tab order for that group. So even though it's the last field, if I wanted it to start in the ship to zip code, in version 9 I could set it that way without having to move it up to the top. Okay, so just be aware of that. You do have a little bit more flexibility in version 9 with your tab order than we do here in the version 8. Now, if you don't like seeing this little properties down here, you can close it up and just focus on the icons. Okay. I like seeing this because a lot of times I may want to slightly move things. I may not want to move them a great amount. So let's say that I'm moving this one. I can say from the top, right now it's set at 605, I want to make this 610. And you'll see it moves it just a little bit. So when you need to fine tune things, having the properties down here makes it a little easier. Okay. This right here is going to add an active text link. I have not used this a great deal, but this would be if you wanted to put a link to a website on a screen. Okay, I've seen it most commonly on the main home screen. You know, where maybe you want them to be able to go and look up your competitors' information to price match. That's generally when I've seen that used. Now, this icon will add a navigator form. For those of you that have touch screens, you may already have this on your screen. It just brings up this little navigator box that I can move over here to the side, and then I can make it bigger and taller. Okay, and what that does is it gives me a virtual 10 key or a virtual keyboard. So if I have touchscreen, this would come in handy. Okay, but that is a navigator. So I'm going to take that off there. Now, we've talked about the delete key. We've talked about the save and exit and the undo key. Now, you can add a picture or select a background for your picture. So if I do this, it's going to open up a file and ask me, okay, what image do you want? Okay, I don't even know it. Okay, let's go ahead with that one. And then I will go ahead and click open. Now you'll see that logo is my background. A little bit busy there. Okay, not going to work for you. You can erase the background. Okay. You also can add a picture. So if I just want to add the picture in, I click on that and click open. Now I just move that picture or that logo wherever I want it to sit. And I resize it, make it work for me. Okay? So now when I'm ringing up a sale, this is going to show up on my screen. Okay? To delete it, you simply highlight, you click on delete, and it disappears. Okay? This large capital A is to allow you to add a label. Now, anyone that has worked with me in version 8 especially, I use labels quite extensively when I am setting up your screens. And what I like to use them for is reminders. You may have noticed that when I was using this standard 1024 by 768, this right here is a label. And this was added onto a screen because the cashiers kept forgetting to ask the customer, how did you hear about us? So rather than, make this big and bold, we put a reminder here of what they need to do. I've also used the labels as a step-by-step guideline. So for some customers that have a hard time remembering, do this, then this, then this, a lot of times I will add labels. Step 1, click here. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do that. So a label just is as simple as it sounds. Okay. Now when I first do that, it puts the label up here in the upper left-hand corner. I'm just going to drag it down to the bottom. Now, I'm going to change the font of this by coming back to my Page Designer window, and I want this to stand out. So I'm going to make it bright yellow. I'm going to make it big and bold and in their face. So nobody can say, well, I didn't see it. Okay? I'm going to go bold, and I'm going to go size 16. Now that yellow is really hard to see, so on the gray, so I'm going to change that. Let's see how the lime looks. That works. That's bright enough. And now I might even make that font bigger just so I can. Okay? That's all there is to adding in a label. Okay? Now, let me get back into the screen that we cleaned up. And that was the large 800 by 600. Okay? So now you can also add, this right here lets you add an active picture link. I don't know, I've been doing this about 18 years, and I don't know that I've ever used that necessarily. Never really found a need for it, but know that if you have a picture that when you click on it actually takes you someplace, that's what that would do. Right next to it is Add Active Button. I use this a lot. Okay? What it basically allows me to do is take any button that I would normally see here on the side, like the Tender button, and it allows me to put that button smack dab on my screen. So I'm going to click on that button, and I'm going to choose the Tender button. These are in alphabetical order. So I want the Tender button, and I'm going to click OK. Now it starts off as just a little tiny button. I'm going to bring it down here to the screen, and first off, I'm going to make it a little narrower because I'm going to make the height of this much bigger. Okay. Now, in order to, let's see here, I believe it was this one. Okay. I make this button bigger so it's easy to see. Now in 9, you do have the ability to increase the font size as well. So you can make the font just as big as everything else. But by having this Tender button here, it would do the same thing as clicking on this Tender button over here. Okay? Like I said, any button that you would keep over here on the side, you do have the potential to put on your screen as well. Obviously, the Tender button would not be available to put on a PO screen, but vendor address isn't necessarily available to put on a receipt screen. So, it is based on where you're at when you're entering in that active text link. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take that off there. Now, this right here allows you to add a memo. So very much like the label, only a memo allows you to type like a paragraph. Now, I've used this as well, where I do 1, do this, 2, do that, and so on. And then when I click OK, My memo is up here, and I can put it over here wherever I want, and again, make it big and bold so it stands out. Okay, we'll go red. Okay, now obviously I need to make this bigger, otherwise you're not going to see that. Okay, so that's another way of putting instructions on there. Okay, now this whole last row down here, these are all alignment fields. So this first one allows you to align to the left. So let's just say, I don't have anything aligned to the left. Let's just say that I wanted to, I'm going to move this over just a little bit, and I want to align this ship to field to match this customer info up here. So I hold down my shift key, and I click on the shipping info, and I'm going to click on align left. That puts it back where it's supposed to be. Okay? I have an align right. I have an align top. Now, if I clicked on align top, this would jump up there, and it would line up and overlap it. I have an align bottom. Okay? I have, if I choose multiple fields, I have this equal vertical spacing between them. Now, watch what happens when I move some of these fields down. Okay? Now, I'm going to grab the rest of these, and I'm going to say equal vertical spacing. It then spaces them out based on the top one and based on the bottom one. Okay? Now I need to just kind of clean up what got shifted. So I'm going to align to the bottom. I'm going to come here to my discount field and align to the bottom here. And then fees, I should be good. Okay? Now, there we go. You also have equal horizontal space. So I want equal distance between this field, and this field. That would be equal horizontal spacing. Okay? I personally don't want that, but that little gray box that this field is overlapping is the title that goes with this tax dollar field. Okay? You also have an adjust width and a reset label position. So you can use these. I mean, I can look at this and go, okay, from the left, this is 1057, or from the top, it's 723. I want to make this one 723. So I can manually change it, and it just goes right over the top. Okay. Put it back where it was, or close to it. Okay. Any questions about anything with Screen Designer? Anything that you've been trying to figure out how to do and you haven't been able to figure it out? Anyone at all? If not, I'm going to go ahead and move forward into Doc Designer. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move forward then. And now if something comes to mind while I'm in Doc Designer, some question about Screen Designer comes to mind while I'm in Screen Designer or Doc Designer, do not hesitate to ask me. Even though we've moved on to the Doc Designer, I am always open to questions. Okay? So I'm going to back out of here. And I have no idea why my Retail Pro is being so slow today. I thought for sure doing version 8 it was going to be faster, but okay, and then one more time. So in both version 8 and in version 9, you're going to find your Doc Designer underneath the Tools menu. Okay, so I go to Tools and then Doc Designer. Now in 9, it is going to have you log in again. It's not based off of who's currently logged into Retail Pro. So it could be that a cashier is currently logged in on a machine, but you want to make a quick doc design change. Well, your cashiers don't have security rights to make doc design changes. You can still open up Doc Designer on that computer and log in with your login and password, and it will allow you to make the changes you need to make. Okay, now in both versions, the first thing that you're going to get when you go into Doc Designer is this little window with all the tabs. Now this is usually when I lose people and they say, oh, that's too complicated. Once you get used to it, it's not so bad, but I do remember, it was a little bit overwhelming the first few times that I came in here and looked at it. Keep in mind, all of the tabs represent a different area of Retail Pro, and they are in alphabetical order, at least to start with. So I always start with an inventory tag because it is by far the easiest document to start with. And if you have not played around with Doc Designer before, I would recommend that you do the same and start with a tag design. They're very simple, they're very straightforward, not a lot of what ifs. The information is either there or it's not there. Okay, but you'll see there's one for POs, there's one for slips, for the receipt. I'm going to go into inventory. Now, I have a lot of different designs in here. I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm just going to scroll down and see what I have, because I have a lot of different designs. I want to start with something. Okay, I did one for webinar. There we go. You know what? We'll just start with this. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. Now, one of the first things that I always do when I'm in Doc Designer working, as you can tell from my screen, it's kind of small. Everything is tightly fit and it looks like it's overlapping and all that. If you use the plus key that's on the 10 key section of your keyboard, it will make it bigger. If you use the minus key, it makes it smaller. But that only works using the 10 key section of your keyboard. So if you're working on a laptop that does not have a 10 key, you will not be able to use the plus and the minus key along the top of the keyboard. Okay, so first and foremost, I make it a little bit bigger. That way I feel like I have room to move around. Now, this is a split tag design, and split tags are probably the most commonly used tag stock that we sell because it's just about 1 inch by 1 inch square, give or take, 2/10 of an inch or whatever. But it is fairly square, fits on, manufacturers' hang tags, it fits on a lot of different products, so it does get used a lot. The first thing I always do when I am now in the design that I want to change, before I highlight anything, I make sure that the access level is set to access level 4. That's so even the part-time cashier, if you tell her to go print a tag, she's going to be able to print a tag for you. Okay? By default, all designs start off at sysadmin access, and if you send that cashier to print a tag and the access level is sysadmin, she won't even see that as a potential tag design. So it'll just give her basically a blank screen. Okay, so always check your access level. Secondly, we want to go into the page info. We want to make sure that the page height and the page width is correct. Now with split tags and full-size tags and hang tags, your height is 1 1/4 inches and your width is 2 1/4 inches. Now, if you notice down here at the bottom it says units, sometimes by default it'll be on characters, and you'll see it's a totally different number. I personally prefer to work in inches because that makes the most sense to me. Okay, I can take a ruler and I can see how big this tag is with the ruler and then make my paper size match. So even though the tag is only 1/2 of this paper size, the paper that it sits on is 2 1/4 inches wide. Okay. Now, once I have the paper size correct, I'm now ready to start manipulating my tag design. So the first thing I need to do, you'll notice this gray box right here. This gray box is what we call a band. And you'll notice over here on the Properties tab, type of band says horizontal repeated detail. If this was a little wider, you'd see that that said horizontal repeated detail. Okay, that means that this particular design only has to be designed on the left-hand side, and it will horizontally repeat to the right-hand side. In the older versions, we had to design on both sides. So if you did something, you made it look really cool on the left, you had to duplicate it on the right. Now, you have a couple of options here. You can either check the auto horizontal repeat and just check that box, or you can tell it how many it's supposed to repeat. I typically set this for 2, and that way I'm controlling how often it repeats rather than the computer deciding how often it repeats. Okay? Now, once you're in this band, you can, first thing I do once I'm in the band is, especially if I'm starting with a default. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do. Let me pull up the default, because this would be basically what you would be doing. Okay, so let's go with in basic. There we go. Okay. Make it bigger with my plus key. I change my access level. So anyone that I tell to print can print. I look at the page info. Now, this page info is incorrect for this size tag. Okay, I'm going to change the page height to be 1.25 and the page width to be 2.25. Okay, that is the actual, as it comes out of the tag printer, that is the size of the paper for each perforated tag, for each tag that you have. Okay, now I'm going to click on the band and make sure that the band matches my paper width. And here you'll see that it does not. So I'm going to change this. Hold on real quick. I don't know why my Of course, now that I want to show you how to do that, if auto, let's do auto width. I'm missing something here. Type of band. It. I don't know why it's not letting me change things. Oh, I know why. I should know. This is very basic. So the reason it's not allowing me to change anything in the band is because this particular band has been locked. Now, you'll notice over here along the right-hand side, we have 4 tabs: Properties, Miscellaneous, Design Tree, and Fields. Properties, pretty self-explanatory. This is where the font is. how far from the left it is, how far from the right it is, you know, what field we're pulling in, that type of thing. Miscellaneous are all the fields that you might want to add to a design that are not necessarily Retail Pro fields, like inserting an image or a shape. I don't have a shape field in my Retail Pro, but I might want to put a shape on this design. The design tree is exactly like what it sounds like. It shows me the band and then all the fields that are in that band. Well, you'll notice, I want you to notice this little thumbtack that's right next to the band name. That lets me know that this band is locked. So if I right-click on it and I click on Lock Band, the little thumbtack goes away. If I right-click on it again and lock it back, I get my thumbtack back. With that thumbtack on there, it does not matter if you're logged in as sysadmin or not, which I am. It will not allow you to make any changes at all because it's locked. So unlock it and then you'll be able to make changes. Last but not least, the Fields tab. This is going to show you every field that potentially can be put on this design. Now, obviously, if we're looking at an inventory tag, most of these fields are inventory related. I would not find a receipt number on here because that's not something I would typically print on a tag. I wouldn't find, I would find most everything, but voucher number, receipt number, that type of thing, not going to find here. Now, if I'm working on a receipt design, I'm not going to find, I'm not going to find things that I only find in a tag design. So they are comparable to whatever type of design you're working on. Okay. So now that I've unlocked it, let me fix my paper size. There we go. Makes a world of difference when I can get in there. Now, once I have the paper size, and the paper size is really, really important because for any of you that have ever printed a tag and it skipped a tag in between or it printed slightly off or something along those lines, 9 times out of 10 it comes back down to the paper size in the document design or the paper size in the printer drivers. Those all have to match up and be identical. For those of you that print both normal and sticky tags, but you also print jewelry tags, you are well aware that we have installed your printer twice. It's one printer, but we install it twice because the paper size is so different between the jewelry tag and all the other tags that we have to make its own printer drivers for it. So that's, for those of you that do print more than just splitter or normal, that's why you have 2 copies of your printer. Okay. Now that I've got my paper size correct and I know I'm good there, I usually take this opportunity to get rid of anything that I'm not looking to keep. Okay. Everything within these black dots is going to show up on my tag. Well, this barcode is not my item number barcode. Okay, it's a UPC and it's a bad UPC code. So I'm going to delete it off there because I don't want it. I don't want the DCS name on there. And you'll see as I click on a field, it shows you the title of that field. I don't want that on there. Okay. I don't want a discontinue date on there. So I'm taking that off. Okay. Item number. Now, we all know how important item number is. And for you version 9 customers, that's the equivalent of your ALU is your item number in version A. And that's important to have on a tag, but I prefer to put the number underneath the barcode, so I'm going to take that off there as well. Now I see what I'm left with. My DCS, my vendor code, description 1 and 2, attribute and size, and my price. But I still need to get a barcode on there. So I'm going to come over here to my Fields tab. This is where all of my potential fields are. And you'll notice up at the top, the first little grouping that I have is the different types of barcodes I can put on there. I'm going to put an item number barcode on there. So I'm going to left click and drag it out and then release it and it puts the barcode there. Now there are a few settings that you want to adjust if you're going to put a barcode on any type of document. First and foremost, the barcode type is absolutely critical. There are quite a few different formats that a barcode can be in. Watch what happens when I change it from 205 to 128. The barcode looks different now. Slightly different, but I don't know where that came from, but now the other thing that you want to do is you want to turn on the high quality. If you're getting black and white lines and they look kind of squiggly or kind of pixelated, go into your tag design and make sure that high quality is turned on. Okay, that's going to give you nice sharp edges. Now, most people don't realize this, but when you scan a barcode, it's not actually scanning the black lines. It's scanning the white spaces in between. So you want to make sure that you don't have any field too close to your barcode, especially if you have a box around your price. That outside edge line of your price box could be misconstrued as a line of the barcode, okay, because there's a white space in between them. Okay. Now, I usually set the barcode length for 6, which in version 8 is the maximum number of characters that you can have. In version 9, I don't usually set it up that way as much because you have a lot more numbers that you can work with. I usually start you off with 6, and then if we need to go higher than that, then we'll go higher than that. But that way, whether I'm printing barcode number 1 or barcode number 10,000, my barcodes are all going to look similar. Okay, so now that I have my barcode on there, I can choose to not include the text, but I personally like the text on there. Or maybe you like the text above it. Okay, that's an option too. Okay, now you can also alter the font of the numbers that show up underneath. So if you want those to be really easy to read, change your font, make it bold, make it a little bigger. Now you have bigger numbers, but you will get a narrower barcode in the process. So unfortunately, it's a trade-off. Okay, I'm going to put this back. Now, it is more important that a barcode is wide enough rather than tall enough. Okay, so if you're trying to fit a barcode in a fairly small space, width is more important than height. If I took this barcode down to about this right there, okay, this little magnifying glass up here in the corner is my preview. So I click on the preview. That barcode right there is tall enough to properly scan. Even though it looks really short, it's still going to properly scan. Now, I could do something like this. I'm not going to have as good of luck with the barcode like this, and you'll notice it looks very different than it did before. Okay, so this is not as, you'll have more problems with this type of barcode than you will with a short, wide one. Okay, so we're going to move this back the way it was. It doesn't have to be super wide, but wide enough to where you can get a good scan. It's always a good idea when you create a new tag design, print off a couple copies, test them at the point of sale. Okay, if they don't scan at the point of sale, they're not worth printing out, because that's kind of the whole point. Okay, now I have my barcode on there. I'm looking at this tag and I'm going, no, it's really not doing it for me. Okay, it's kind of plain. So, and I want you to notice these fields are not overlapping here in the preview, nor would they in the printout. But if I'm looking at it here, it looks like they're overlapping each other. That is normal, especially in a tag design. So what I'm going to do, first thing I want to do is I want to change the font on this, because I happen to know that this particular font is not going to give me a nice, clean, sharp image. MS Sans Serif does not work well for tag designs. Arial, Times New Roman, Palomino, Tahoma, any Okay, those all work well. So I'm just going to kind of change it down, get a nice, cleaner looking font. Okay, now, again, I thought it was kind of plain. So I want to add something, and I think I'm going to add a logo. But where to add it? So I'm just going to kind of move everything out of the way. I'm leaving it on the screen, but I'm just kind of moving it so I can position where I want to go. I'm going to go to the Miscellaneous tab, and I'm going to insert an image. Now I'm going to left click and release it, and you'll notice that I get a little piece of paper. I left click again to drop it off. Okay. Now, first thing I always recommend when you're adding an image, go back to the Properties tab, click on the Stretch to Fit, and on the Center Picture. So no matter what your pixelation is on the picture, high or low, it's going to put it in the space that you want it to go in. Okay, so I'm just going to shrink this down to the dimensions that I'm looking for. And I'm going to move it up here. Now I've got it close to the top, but not enough that I feel comfortable with it. So I'm going to manually move that over a little bit. Okay, so it's up in the corner, not all the way to the very top and not all the way to the very side. Okay, I'm giving myself just a little bit of breathing room there. Now, once I have it positioned where I want it, I'm going to come over here to where it says Picture, and I'm going to tell it where to find the picture that I want. Okay, and I'm just going to go with this because it works. Okay. Okay, so there is my logo. Now, once I have my logo on there, now I need to figure out where I want everything else to go. With a large tag like this, most logos will work. Some will work on split designs. They all work on hang tags, but anything smaller than a split tag, it's not even worth your time and trouble. It's too small for it to be legible. Okay? So the first thing, I think I want to see my DCS and my vendor code. Now my DCS is fairly wide, and I want to make my vendor code just as wide. So I'm going to, with DCS highlighted first, I'm going to hold down my Shift key, just like we did in Page Manager, Page Designer, and I'm going to click on vendor code, and I'm going to come up here to the top. I have an alignment drop-down arrow. I want to adjust the width of the vendor code to match the DCS. Okay, now they're just as wide. Now I want to align them to the top of each other. So now they're even. If I come over here and I say, okay, let's move those up near the top. Okay, that way they're lined up with this one. I'm actually going to move the vendor code over just a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to right justify it. Okay, this is left justified, this is right justified. Okay, now I'm going to move these out of the way because what I want to do next is I want to put my description 1 up there. I want it to line up with my DCS, so I align it to the left. Now I can make this a little bit wider. Okay, and then I'm going to move it up to where it looks like it's slightly overlapping. In fact, I'm going to move it down just a little bit manually. Okay, now my description 1 is positioned where I would like it to show up. Okay, I've got a little bit of space between that and the DCS. So now that I know description 1 is how I want it, I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click on description 2. And I'm going to adjust the width. I'm going to align it to the left. And then I'm going to move the description 2 up where I want it. Okay, and again, I put it just a little higher than I want, so I'm going to manually move it. Okay. Now, last but not least, in fact, I think I may bring this down just a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to put the attribute right here and align it with all the other fields. Okay. I am going to make it as wide as my DCS because that's a good width. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the vendor code and size and align it to the right. Now I'm going to take the attribute and the size and align it to the top of each other. Okay, and then I'm going to move them both up. Okay, actually what I think I will do is I will take my picture, click on the attribute, the size, and align them to the bottom. So the bottom of the picture is where the bottom of my data will come. So now I have this gap right in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an equal vertical distance. And I want to do just these left-hand side fields. Okay, so I'm going to do equal vertical spacing. Okay, and now spread them out. Now, once those are spread out, I need to align the size field again to make sure that it's equal. I also want to make my size field right justified so it kind of balances the other side out. Now, especially for shoes and clothing stores, with size, I usually want the size to really stand out, or maybe I want my description to stand out. So I may take my description too and increase the font of that. Okay, right now it's narrow 8. Let's make it a regular 8. Actually, let's make it a narrow bold. Okay, we'll maybe make it 9. Okay, that's going to make that description stand out a little bit more. The size field, I'm going to do even more so, because one of the first things that people look at when they're buying something, once they've decided I like this and the price is acceptable, they start looking for their size, either to try it on or, you know. So I'm going to increase the font of the size to be quite big, so even across the room on a shoe box, I can see what size is in this box. I also want to make my price bigger, because you want, in most cases, you want your price to be easily visible so you're not constantly being asked, what's the price of this, or how much is this? You want the customer to be able to see that. So I am going to make it bold 11, and I'm going to take this down just a little bit. It's a little big. Okay. Now I'm going to make my price field bigger so I can see it. Okay. Now we'll take a look at our preview. Okay. So this is just an example of what you could do with a tag design. Your creativity is the only limitation that you have. Okay. It's not difficult. It's just, you know, it takes a little bit to get used to. And I think that's why most people don't spend time at Doc Designer, because they get frustrated really early on. It's not doing what I want it to do. That's why I recommend you start with a tag design, because there's only one band. There's very few subcategories in here. If you'll notice, almost everything is underneath inventory item. There are a few exceptions for multi-vendor and price levels, but most everything is right there under inventory item. Okay? So now, any questions about anything that I've covered so far in Doc Designer? Because I'm going to take you into something a little bit more complicated. Okay. Okay then. So now I'm not going to save this, but normally you would want to come up here to File and Save As and give it whatever name makes sense to you. Now, many, many years ago, I started putting exclamations on all of my designs. And any of you that have worked with me know this because your designs have that exclamation. And many years ago, the techs that worked here at the time started harassing me because they could always tell when I had made a design because it had the exclamation point. And when I explained to them the reason I do that is because computers organize first by symbols, then by numbers, then by letters. That way your specialized design sits up at the top of the list rather than intermingled alphabetically with everything else. The exclamation is the A of the symbols. So I could have one in there that had an exclamation and one that had an asterisk. The exclamation is going to come first over the asterisk. Okay, but make sure that you give it a name. Don't just leave it on normal basic, because you want to know that this is one that you modified, that you changed, and this is your special tag. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this design, and I'm not going to save it. I don't need another tag design in there. Now, up here in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to click on the Open icon. I could also come to File and Open. Okay, it brings up all your tabs again. Every design that you work on, you will have to open that one design. Even if you're doing multiple tag designs, you can have multiple open, but to get them open, you do have to use the Open option each time. Now I want to go in and I want to show you a Pio design. Okay. Now, I'm just going to start with this one right here. Okay, we'll start with that one. Okay, so this Pio design, actually, I think I have one that okay, so I'm going to start with this one instead. Okay, again, I use the plus key to make it a little bit bigger, so it's a little easier for me to manipulate and move things around. Now, in this case, if we come over here to the design tree and I open it up, you'll see there's more than just one band in here. In fact, in some cases, there are bands within bands. So this is one band, this is another band, another one, another one. All of these bands are related to this one. Okay? Same thing down here. Okay? So that's one of the main reasons I suggest that you start with a tag design, because you don't have to worry about, do I have it in the right band? Is it the right type of band? I'm going to go ahead and highlight this top band, and we're going to go to Properties. This band type is a page header. Now that means that everything in this box is going to print on the top of every single page of the PO. So if I have a 3-page PO, every page is going to have the PO number and the page number. It's also going to have the vendor's information and my information. Okay? It's also going to show me my subtotal and my dates, when I've set up my order date, ship date, all of that. Every single page. Now, you can also, there are different types in here. You'll notice there is a design header. A design header will only print on the top of the first page, and that is it. So if I made this a design header, page 1 would have all of this information, but page 2 and 3 would be blank, and the items would start right up near the top. For some people, that's how they prefer it, and that it's entirely your choice in how you prefer it. You'll notice there's also a band header. So if I wanted to put a band within this page header band, that would be a band header. Like we have down here, this is a band header for the items. Every one of these bands in here, 1, 2, and 3, they're all related to the individual items. Okay? This right here is a band header for that bigger band itself. Okay, but that's what a band header is. Now you'll notice there's also design footers and band page footers. They basically work the same way as a header, except the opposite direction. A design footer would only print on the last page of your document. A page footer would print on the bottom of every single page. And then band footer would be the last type. Okay? Excuse me. Now, I don't want to change this from page header, but I do want to come down to the next band. Okay? Again, when you first get into a design, it's not a bad idea to come up here to File and go Save As and give it a completely different name, okay? So I'm just going to label this one Webinar. So if I completely mess it up, I mean, I just tear it up and I cannot figure out how to get it undone, no harm, no foul. It was just a copy, okay? So let's say that I want to take some of these fields off. It's just as simple as highlighting the field, pressing the delete key, or using this delete key up there. You can do either one, okay? So once you've made a copy, you might find that it's helpful to go in and in each band figure out what you want to take off. Once you take it off, then you know how much you can put back on. You see how much room is left. Personally, I like everything that's in this band, so I'm going to leave it alone. Now I come down to this band. You'll notice this is not a page footer or a page header or a design header. It's just a general band. Now most of the bands that you'll have on your documents will be general bands. Other than the header and the footer and where the items show up, everything else is general for the most part. Okay, but I will show you, you have non-repeating headers, you have non-repeating footers, detail, so there's a few other options. If you want to really get into, the horizontal repeated detail or the grid, I would recommend that you schedule some time with your trainer and work one-on-one, because those are a little more complicated, even above and beyond what we're looking at now. Okay, so I'm going to come back here to General. Now, again, here is my band header within this band. Okay, and you'll notice that the bigger band that they're all sitting in is a detail band. That's very important. If you left this as a general band and you went to print a PO, you would get the first line item that's on your PO or on your voucher or on your receipt. By changing it to a detail band, it knows to grab and list everything that was on that document that you just printed. I'm so glad that it was helpful, and like I had mentioned, it will be up on our YouTube site, and we are planning to email it to everybody, so you will get the full webinar. Okay. Thank you very much for attending. Okay, so now this top one is a band header, okay? And these are all labels. You'll notice underneath the miscellaneous tab, we have an insert label, okay, or insert memo. But these we don't need a memo for. These are short enough that a label is going to work. Memos we use a lot of times for your refund policy on your receipts. If you need to put some verbiage on your sales order, your purchase order, or something like that, that prints every single time you print that document, we usually use a memo, because a memo allows us to enter in a large amount of verbiage. It also automatically will wrap itself. So if it's not wide enough to fit on the receipt paper, it'll wrap it around to the next line. But in this case, these are all labels. If I were to highlight one of these and go to the properties, you'd see it says RE label 26. The caption is what that label says. If I change this to description, except I have to spell it right, it now changes it on that title. And if I look at the preview, it's an immediate change. Okay? So it's not uncommon to change the labels to match what data is in that field. Because this gets sent off to your vendor, we need to make sure that your vendor understands what you're trying to order. Okay? But these are all labels for column headers. Now this next band down right here, you'll notice it is a detail band within the detail band. But this one actually tells you what data field name these fields all come from. It is the PO items. So if I come over here to fields, you'll notice here's all your different kinds of barcodes. These are the fields that you can put that are related to the PO document. Your address, the vendor's address, the instruction fields. If I scroll down a little bit, there's a subcategory of PO item. Everything in here is item related. You'll notice all of these fields, DCS, description 1 through 4, cost, price. Those are all fields you'd find on a document about the item. Okay? If I minimize this, I have the same thing. I have PO quantity fields. I have totals fields, vendor fields. So there are subcategories, subheaders within the fields themselves. And it's very important if I'm going to add a field to this band that the field I grab comes from the PO item part of the tree. So let's just say, for argument's sake, I was going to, let's just say I'm going to take the PO due out of here. Okay, so I simply delete it. Now, I'm going to take the UPC, and I'm going to put the UPC right in that field. The good news is they are in alphabetical order. So within the PO item, I grab the UPC, left click and drag it out and put it onto the screen. Now, I recommend that you aim low or make this band taller so it's easier to get it in there. That first time that I did it, it overlapped the top and basically thought that I wanted the UPC field up here at the top, and then it wouldn't work. So I put it right there. Okay. Now, I'm going to use this field right here, hold down my Shift key, highlight the UPC. I'm going to make it equal, adjust the height. I'm going to adjust the width. I'm going to go to the Properties tab, and I'm going to make the font the same. Okay, then I'm going to align it to the top. Now that I have it in place, I'm going to move it over just a little bit. Okay, and make it just a little bit wider because I can. Okay. Now, once I have that in place, I'm going to shrink my band back up. Don't forget to shrink it up. Otherwise, all that empty space that I created would be empty space in between each line on your PO. Okay. Better to be a little over the fields than to be under the fields, unless you want that extra spacing. Okay. Now, unfortunately, though, I don't have a title in here. So I'm going to open up my title band, and I'm going to go to Miscellaneous. I'm going to insert a label. So I left-click on it. I get my little piece of paper. Once I have it where I want it, I left-click on it again. Now I need to make it look similar. So I want it to be the same height and align to the top as the cost field. So again, I'm going to do my height and align it to the top. I'm also going to copy the font. Okay. Now, from here, I wanted to mimic the data that I'm going to show up there. So I'm going to highlight UPC first, then click on the label. I'm going to make it the equal width, and I'm going to align it to the left. Now I have that extra label in there, and I can change the title or the caption. Okay? Now, once I have that in there, I'm now ready to shrink up this band again. Okay? Now, you may have noticed that we have a line right there. Okay? That line came from inserting a shape. Okay? So I can come in here, insert a shape. I just simply click it. It always starts you with a rectangle, but if you go to the Properties tab, you can choose the shape that you want. So maybe I want a circle. Okay, and I want this circle to circle around the cost. So I'm just going to shrink it down a little bit and move it over. Now, I haven't ever had a situation where I did this, but you could. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit narrower. Okay, and maybe a little taller. Okay, look at my preview and see how bad that actually looks. Okay, so rather than you having to circle it, you could do that if you wanted to. Okay, I don't particularly want to, but make sure you shrink up your band when you're all done changing that particular band. Okay, so this last band here, this is what we call a not on page break footer, meaning that it's the footer of the detail band that we're looking at, but we don't want a page break. We want this to stick with the items. So even if it was going to run into a second page, this would break at the bottom of the page. It would show up on the top of the next page if we ran out of room. Okay? So that, now in here, we had these 5 different bands. Okay? If we go into a receipt design, which is probably the most commonly changed design, okay, I know I have one in here that I can use. Go. Okay, let's go with, there we go. Okay. Okay, so there's a lot going on this receipt. If we look at the design tree for this, look at all the bands that are in there. Okay, there's bands within bands, and some of them are locked. So if you're going to come in here and make changes and you don't want to get stopped dead in your tracks when you get to the discount field, unlock everything first. Okay. And you have to left click on the field first, then right click to unlock it. Okay, so everything is unlocked. So we have bands within bands. Okay. Now, this first band up here, it is a header band, a design header. I only need the logo to print on the top of the receipt. If it goes into 2 pages, I don't need it to print it again on the second one. Okay. What I've done here, this right here, is insert image. Okay. And this one is already set up. I centered the picture and stretched to fit. This is a design that I used to start with when I made version 8 designs because it had everything laid out the way that I liked it. And so if somebody said they wanted to use their logo, I would use this particular design as a starting point because a lot of the cleanup had already been done. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us. Have a good night. Okay. So, but there are bands within bands. So, like I had mentioned earlier, I would recommend that you start off with the tag design, get used to the aligning and get used to the different tabs over here along the side. Get comfortable with that first, then try to tackle a Pio design or a slip design or a voucher design. If you're feeling really good and you're getting the hang of it, and personally, I love Doc Designer. It was rough in the beginning, I'll admit, because we unfortunately didn't have anyone to teach us. We had to kind of trial by error. But now it's one of my favorite areas to come in and play around with because I can get creative. And typically, I'm not a super creative person. You know, I'm more everything has to be equally lined up. If it's on the left, it has to be on the right type of person. And so I can make a tag look as pretty or as nice as I deem necessary. I can make a receipt look as official or professional as I want to. So that would be my best advice for all of you is start off small, start off simple, and get used to it, get used to Doc Designer, And then if you need a little bit more coaching or you want to get a little bit more involved, you can always schedule a training with your trainer. And for those of you that have turned in a training checklist, that is a topic that is covered under free refresher training. Okay, so you wouldn't have to pay for it if you've turned in your checklist. Or, you know, if you just want some one-on-one training or you want somebody to help you with a design, that's a good excuse to call a trainer as well. Now, the techs are fully capable of making doc design changes, although they may give you the impression that they can't. They all know how to, they just prefer not to. It's not something that they spend a great deal of time in, and we kind of have an agreement with them. We won't mess with their technical side of things, the way computers are set up and running, and they don't mess with our doc designs or screen designs. So it's going to be a lot more efficient if you schedule some time with a trainer. Okay. Now, the hardest design, and I would not recommend that you do this on your own, it's not one that any of the trainers look forward to changing, and that is the XZ out design. When someone asks us, hey, can you change the X out design for me, or the Z out design, we all just kind of cringe a little inside because it is the most unforgiving design of the bunch, and it's so general. So I just want to show you kind of quickly so you'll understand if you ask for it why you're getting that little bit of pushback, okay, is that this design, you have to figure out what you want to change. Here's where the dollars would be listed. Here's where the checks would be listed and all that information. So again, this is the body band, but look at all of the bands underneath that band and then bands underneath that. So they're like drilled down to the 10th or, you know, whatever degree. It's a difficult design to change. So it can be changed to a certain degree. You know, if you say, well, I don't want it to print the workstation number and the date, all I want on the top is the date. Unfortunately, if all you wanted was the date, we could just put the report date and time, but if you didn't want to show the store or the station or the workstation, we don't have any way of picking and choosing what part of the filter it shows. So to a certain degree, it can be changed, just some things. It's an all or nothing type of setting, like the filter criteria. That includes the store, the station, the workstation, you know, all that information. I can't pick and choose what part of that information I want to put on the design. I either put it on there or I don't put it on there. And that's how a lot of the fields are on this design. So with that said, any questions about Doc Designer? I know I've given everybody just a ton of information today. And again, feel free to rewatch the recording over and over again. If you think it'll help and you want to give it a shot, feel free to. Morgan, did you have a question?
Hi, how are you, Tanya?
I'm doing good. Did you have a question? I missed your hand.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I did. Is the Doc Designer then the same across to the version 9 platform as it is to the 8 platform? It is
exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Okay, I didn't know if you covered that or not.
Yeah, no problem. With Screen Designer, there are some slight differences. With with Doc Designer, there are no differences. Okay. The only difference that you might see, especially if you're going from 8 to 9 and you've been using Doc Designer, it took us a little bit to get used to. Let me get into our tag. So in version 8, if I click on this field, the data field name tells me what that field is. In 9, the data field name is E5761 or it's E something. So it's a character, so you don't really know what it is unless the caption is correct. So that's really the only difference between the two, though.
I gotcha. And how do you find that the same way you do, like, what type of barcode? We just basically call into you guys and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do?
Well, what I would recommend, if you guys want to jot this down, typically for Split, hang, and normal size tags, or anything larger than 1 inch by 1 inch. Code 128 is the best. We found the best and the most consistently scannable barcode. Okay, the code 128. You can use a code 3 of 9 as long as your scanner's been programmed for it. And again, that's why we recommend that you test it after you print out a couple barcodes. Don't print out the whole inventory and then test it. Print out a few different tags of different items. Give them all a good test. Make sure they all scan quickly and efficiently. But if you're doing a small tag, a jewelry tag, or we have a little mini tag that's like half of the jewelry tag. For those, we use the 2 of 5 IL, and it's very important that it's the IL because that particular format works really well with small barcodes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Those are no problem. Those are the two that we use the most, but if you ever forget that, feel free to send us an email, hop in the chat room, whatever, say, I can't remember what format to put my barcodes in. And we'll give you an answer right then and there.
Wonderful.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Any other questions related to anything, RPro? I'll open it up for general questions. Okay, well then on that note, if there are no questions, I'm going to let everybody get back to work. And I want to thank you for joining me today. You've been a really good group, very attentive. Again, we will be sending out a MP4 of this webinar. It's a new process that we're starting, so bear with us. We're trying to find the best way of getting the recording to you directly, so you don't necessarily have to go to YouTube if you don't want to, but it will be put up on YouTube within the next couple of days as well. So thank you again, and feel free to join us for any and all webinars that interest you. Okay. Now, Missy, are you still on the line?
I'm muted.
Okay.
I
unmuted you, so
thank you.
No problem. I just happened to see that you had sent an email saying you had questions. Is
Yes.
there something that you'd like to ask me directly, or is it okay to ask here in the group?
No, I can ask in the group.
Okay.
I had a question. I've sent several emails because I didn't know how to ask any questions. But
okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Back to like Doc Design. Can you change like the feed types if they're a negative to be a different color on the screen than what they are?
You can't, because Doc Designer doesn't recognize negative or positive. It just pulls the data from that field.
Okay.
So whatever it will show the negative mark, because on the field on the screen it shows the negative mark or the parentheses on the screen. That will be the way that it shows on the printout, but it doesn't. Doc Designer doesn't understand negatives or positives.
Okay.
Good question though. That's a good question.
And I'm having a terrible time with like jewelry tags. I have tried the second printer and changing all of the properties in the printer, and I cannot get it to print consecutively. Like, I can get it to print one tag, and that's it. But I think,
What I would recommend, first thing that I would want to check is, like I'd mentioned early on, is that we have the paper size correct on the design itself, and that the paper size is correct in the printer. If there's two places in the printer that we need to check on. If any of those are off slightly, that'll give you where it'll print one, skip 3, print another one, skip 2, or whatever it's doing.
Well, where do I find it in what two places in the printer?
Okay, so let me show you real quick. I think I have a tag printer hooked up. I don't have one, but I might be able to show you here. Okay, so in the tab printer, now this is a receipt printer that I'm showing you the example, but it would be the same for your tag printer. Okay, first place is here on the General tab. You want to come down here to Preferences, okay, and then Paper Quality, and there should be a paper size in there.
Okay.
Okay. If that should be set for a jewelry tag, it should be set 2.25 wide by 0.5 high. It's a ½ inch tall.
Yep.
Okay. Secondly, if it's okay there, then go to the Advanced tab and go to the Printing Defaults, and the same thing there. Go to Paper Quality, make sure your paper size is correct.
Defaults. Paper size correct. Okay.
Okay. Now, if either of those get changed, make sure that you click on the Apply button before you click OK.
Okay.
Now, what you need to do, if you've made changes, close Retail Pro and reopen it back up, because Retail Pro doesn't automatically refresh when you make a change in the Windows environment. So close it, reopen it. That way it picks up that change you just made.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And if that still doesn't work, give us a call and we'll see if something else isn't going. We may have to replace the printer. That may be where you're at this point.
Okay, I have like the TLP 2844.
Okay, it's an older model. I'm assuming that you've probably had about 4 or 5 years at least.
Oh gosh, oh, it's not more.
Yeah, I was going to say that one's been around for quite some time, but they did discontinue it 3 or 4 years ago. So you're probably that may be where it's coming down to. We'll do our best to get it working for you, but I want you to be prepared. You may need to invest in a new tag printer.
Okay.
Okay, most printers, you get 4 or 5 years worth of life out of them. If you've had it longer than that, you've been doing amazing with it. So, you know, you're probably about due at this point.
Okay.
Okay?
So do I just call you to figure that out?
Now, like I said, if all those settings are correct, then call into tech support. I'm hard to get a hold of because I'm on trainings all day, but tech support will put you on the board, and you'll talk to one of the technicians, and they'll probably have you check a few things or test a few things, and they'll make that determination, especially if you let them know that we've determined well, they're going to know when you say a 2844 that it's an older printer. So, but they will ask you what model you have, and it's going to be important for them to know that.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Thank you so much. I learned a lot.
You're very welcome. Well, I'm glad. I like it when people can walk away and feel like they learned something. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And feel free to join any webinar that piques your interest.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye, everyone.